What if I told you that there is reason to believe that Bitcoin could exceed 200,000 before it ever goes sub 100k again? Note I am making this claim while Bitcoin is much closer at 114k, and yet still I went ahead and made that the topic and title of this video. We'll be exploring why I did that, the reasoning, and obviously the implications, because if this somehow ends up being the case, it could literally decide who does what with this cycle. Gains and losses could be decided on this idea, so make sure you pay attention, watch the whole way through, and without wasting time, let's get into it. We first need to get some significant details out the way. Big one being that if Bitcoin at any point in this cycle goes below 74k, the bottom in April preceding this run, bull market will officially be over. This is the line in the sand in my opinion. Now, with Bitcoin being at 114k, that does mean it can go back below 100k and still have the cycle continue and resume healthy. This scenario was quite similar to when we topped at 109k, where with that dump, we came back and tested the previous high at 74k. And if you recall, the idea was that if Bitcoin at any time went below the previous swing low at 49k, the cycle would be done. Fortunately, it kind of didn't even get close. We made that swing low pattern at 74k and have locally topped so far at 123k. Now, to really put into perspective why 200k could be touched before 100k, we need to look at the nuances and the details of this specific run, the one that bottomed at 74k and has so far gone to 123k, as the details of this price action could help explain why I think this could be on the table. Now, at these lows of 80 to 74k, things did not seem the best. A lot of people flipped bearish, were ready to call it a cycle top. It was quite difficult to navigate, but we on this channel stayed bullish, as you can see from all the evidence, all the videos I posted this year. Not a single bearish take on Bitcoin. That continues to be the case till this day, which you'll see with the rest of this video, and with even more detail in my Discord, where as you can see on March 8th earlier this year, I'd helped people get through this price action, through that weekly cycle low at 74k, projecting that green box and the timing for a visit up to 120k plus. That's exactly what ended up happening. It's difficult to keep this updated on the YouTube, as I can only make a video every couple days, but this is where I give my live day-by-day updates when it matters for navigating this tricky price action. Ultimately, it ended up working out. We got to 120k plus, and in the Discord, I'm currently doing the exact same thing with this low time frame price action, the chop between 114, 113k. So if you want those live updates, there is a link to the Discord in the description to help you navigate this price action for, again, what could be a massive push up or a rollover to sub 100k. So do check that out if you're interested. But here's the deal. I wouldn't be too quick to say that Bitcoin has already topped at 123k. It could have for sure, but with current Bitcoin price action, it has not invalidated any price structure whatsoever. Meaning, in my opinion, on the lower time frame, price action and a push above 123k is quite warranted. Obviously, if certain levels are breached and held below, then that changes, but for now, that is not the case. Therefore, as said on my Twitter, I'm very confident that the cycle top is not in, not at all, and that the top for this current run also may not be in. And if you're confused, the reason I keep saying current top and macro top and sort of differentiating the two is because if you've been watching this channel, you know I think a pullback is warranted and will happen, where a local top is put in maybe at 130, 140k, whatever it is, and then sometime between now and I'd say the end of September, probably, a bottom is then put in before we go for liftoff for my end of cycle targets between 150 to 200k on the lower end. And it could be that the top before that drawdown is already in at 123k before that push up to 150 plus. However, we're challenging that idea as well, that within itself may also not be in, by again the fact that price action has not yet invalidated anything, meaning a new all-time high in August I think is possible. But with the lower time frame price action out the way, and knowing that rise from 74k to 123 and potentially going up higher, why would I go out of my way to make a video titled 200k before 100k. With that background, let's now establish that. So in my opinion, this run we're in, the one from 74k to 123, is the fourth run that Bitcoin has had this cycle. First being from the bottom of 16k, this top at 32k. Then we had the rise from 25k to 74k, then the third run from 50k to 109, and now the fourth run from 74 to so far 123. And so if this is now our fourth run, we can now compare it to the other runs and try to extract data to maybe project for what to expect on this run. Now from the first to the second run, when we broke that local high, we went up 130%. So from that high of 32k to the high of 74k, it was 132% gain. And then from the high of 74k to the high of 109k, that was almost a 50% gain. So you could say it was half of that difference between the first and the second run. Well, here's the thing. If this fourth run topped at 123k, objectively, I think that would be quite bad. In fact, I'd say it's quite bearish. That would make it only a 10-11% gain on the previous high at 109k. Now, if this run from the peak of the second to the third was a plus 50% run and was half of the gain from 1 to 2, well, if we project another half on that, a 20% run, that would put Bitcoin up at 130k, which I think is a lot more fair of a target because it would also help satisfy the norms that we've seen in the drawdowns so far. From the peak of the first run to that bottom before the next run, Bitcoin went down 21%. Then from 74k to 50k, it went down 33%. And from the top of 109k to the bottom of 74k, it went down 32%. If the top of this fourth run is 123k, a 20% decline would put it at around 100k actually, and a 30% decline would put it around 85k. Now, like we said, this bull market is over if we go below 74k. So even though a decline to 85k technically doesn't trigger that, there's a very decent likelihood that it may end up doing that, where we get that decline, a bounce, and then we roll over. In other words, everything I'm saying is that if we've topped at 123k, it would be the worst all-time high break we've seen so far this cycle, which is not what you want during time like now, which is going into Q4 of 2025. Now, remember how I said that even half of the gain that we saw from 2 to 3 applied to 3 to 4 would put Bitcoin at around 130 to 136k. Well, all of a sudden, if those numbers are hit, which is a constant pattern we've seen so far this cycle, it would also allow the patterns of the drawdowns we've seen this cycle to continue to happen. A local top of 132k with a 20% decline would put Bitcoin at around 105k. And with a 30% decline would put it at 92,000. But I believe that if we get above like 135k, we'll probably hold 100k. I think it is such a psychological resistance or support, depending on what side of it you're on, that people may not allow a breach lower. And so now all of a sudden, on this run, if we do push up to 130k plus, which the lower time frame suggests is still on the table, and we locally top there and then get a drawdown synonymous to what we've seen so far this cycle, there is decent reason to believe we may not breach 100k. And then eventually from there we bottom out, similar to how we bottomed out at 74k or 49k, and then go on that final push up. So my whole idea of 200k before 100k is actually something you want. And now obviously on surface level, it is what you want because it'd mean a higher number. But I think structurally as well, it's what you want. I don't think you want this top to have been at 123k. It's not healthy. It won't allow things to continue in the way that they've gone so far. If 123k is where Bitcoin ended up topping on this local run, then I would have preferred that it didn't break all-time highs at all. The significance of breaking all-time highs is that price action, in my opinion, now has a burden to achieve certain things, where if it doesn't, then it may do the opposite and trigger some things that we don't want. For example, if we've now topped at 123k, that would be the third stroke of what is some pretty brutal bearish divergence. And then the conversation could become that this this wasn't an all-time high break at all. Now, obviously, technically it is, but what I'm trying to say is it could end up being something a lot similar to 2021, where we also got some pretty bad bearish divergence. And this all-time high break kind of didn't end up mattering at all. It was a deviation all along, like so. And so now if Bitcoin closes below 110, 105k, even though the bull market is still on as long as it holds above 74k, this could in hindsight end up looking like deviation as well. So for all those people who didn't watch through and probably commented that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or whatever rude comment they left saying there's no way Bitcoin touches 200k before 100k, well, I'd kind of say if you're bullish on crypto and want crypto to do well, you better be hoping that this happens, because if not, the cycle could be over. I hope all of that makes sense. We will stay updated on all of this, so make sure you're subscribed. Don't want to miss out. Again, if you want those live updates, because this is what I'm actively covering in my Discord, then make sure to join. I would highly recommend it because the implications on altcoins if this happens will be huge as well. All of my altcoin picks will go in there because it's not fair to them if I give it to the public. General market updates and trends is fine, but specific things should be given to those that go out of their way to get them. So that is the idea. But I hope you enjoyed, hope you took this all in, and I will catch you next time.